first noticed the headaches. Then came the insomnia. Soon she was experiencing vertigo to the point of passing out in her own driveway. Now, Sue just thought she was getting old. But according to ABC News on October 21st, 2013, a doctor at Harvard Medical School finally gave her an official medical diagnosis. There was just one problem. The syndrome she was diagnosed with doesn't technically exist. Boston Magazine's February 2014 issue looked at thousands of people who claim to have the same symptoms as Sue. The one thing that unites them? Wind turbines. People who live near wind turbine fields like Sue does have begun reporting an eerily similar set of conditions. Now, the Boston Magazine treats the phenomenon as you'd expect, by asking if these so-called wind turbine syndrome sufferers are just a bunch of fakers. I mean, not one single study has shown any scientific or medical association between the clean energy producing turbines and actual sickness. Until now. One sentence in the January 22nd, 2013 issue of the Journal of Laryngology and Otology may turn this whole potential hoax on its ear, literally. This peer-reviewed study, the first ever done by otolaryngologists who were silent on wind turbine syndrome, concludes there is evidence that infrasound has a physiological effect on the ear. Today we'll explore this supposed wind turbine syndrome by first approaching its legitimacy, second looking at scientific and medical causes, before finally drawing implications. On November 8, 2012, satirist Stephen Colbert mocked the idea of wind turbine syndrome, calling it a communicated disease, saying you can get it just by hearing someone talk about it. So, you've been warned. On September 16, 2013, Salon.com explained we only have two choices. Wind turbines are either making us sick or they're driving us crazy. Let's look at the medical complaints before getting into the controversy. The first cases of wind turbine syndrome were reported back in 2003. According to New York Magazine of March 15, 2013, a British physician did an unpublished study of 36 people in the UK who claimed wind turbines were making them sick. Since then, cases have dramatically risen both abroad and right here in the US, from a few dozen to a few thousand. The Hawaii Tribune Herald of January 4th, 2014 outlined the cluster of different symptoms, including headaches, insomnia, nausea, vertigo, and fatigue. Most importantly, they also described tinnitus and ear pain, which have alleged to trigger the rest of the symptoms. Descriptions are consistent from Australia to the UK to Cape Cod. As Slate.com of March 20th, 2013 concludes, whether or not the syndrome is real, these people believe it is real. And that brings us to the controversy. According to the aforementioned New York Magazine, the term wind turbine syndrome was first coined by Nina Pierpont, a decorated doctor who graduated from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine with distinction. She just so happens to be married to the world's leading anti-wind lobbyist. Still, this doesn't seem to be any kind of a coordinated conspiracy. As WBUR, Boston's NPR affiliate, explained on October 4th, 2013, the community of Falmouth, Massachusetts is adamantly fighting suggestions that they are a bunch of collective hypochondriacs. 25 families have banded together to demand further scientific investigation. What's more, is no one is suggesting that this is an elaborate hoax. As the Slate article explains, their symptoms are real. It's just that they might be caused by other things. But even if it's not a true syndrome, it's still a public health phenomenon worth exploring. The Sydney Morning Herald on March 15, 2013, flat out accuses anti-wind lobbyists of making the whole thing up. But tell that to otology experts who found these claims to be medically legitimate. Let's consider two very different causes. One, if the syndrome is real, the other if it's fake. First, no matter how you look at it, these people's biggest problem is right between their ears, thanks to infrasound. Infrasound is described by the Journal of Health Psychology on March 11, 2013, as subaudible noise capable of having effects on the inner ear. Cambridge Journal of January 22, 2013, explains new evidence concludes wind turbines do, in fact, produce infrasound. And here's how the effects may work. Our inner ear, or our cochlea, is covered in tiny hairs. These hairs help us to establish balance, among other things. Now, as the otolaryngology study found, frequencies that have been proven to come from turbines have some effect on these hairs. So headaches, insomnia, nausea, vertigo, and fatigue could be from infrasound displacing these tiny hairs. But to be fair, even the otolaryngologists admit they need more studies to be sure. But that's a far cry from what the University of Sydney reported on March 14, 2013. Researchers there dismissed the syndrome as a communicated disease. Their research found people began reporting symptoms only after anti-wind farm groups started spreading information about potential health causes. Let's say you have a headache and insomnia, which could be caused by any one of a million different issues. If there's a new wind turbine farm nearby and people begin describing similar symptoms to yours, you suddenly have an answer that makes you feel better. In essence, you've contracted a communicated disease. British Medical Journal of October 14, 2013 calls this the nocebo effect, which is the opposite of the placebo effect. With placebo, you experience positive benefits of medication and therapy because you have positive thoughts toward it. Nocebo occurs when negative information predisposes you to believing something that's harmless is harmful, like maybe a windmill. As the aforementioned Salon.com article says, disagreement over the syndrome's true nature shouldn't preclude any sympathy for the people that are banging their heads against the walls in frustration. There are real impacts here, even if it isn't a real syndrome. Let's explore implications for alternative energy and socioeconomic concerns. Initially, if it's real, we need more research and we need it fast. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration on April 8, 2013, wind energy has jumped 30% in the last year alone. If it's dangerous, more people are at risk, and so is the single most popular form of alternative energy, according to a Gallup poll from April 4, 2013. But let's say it's not real. The fear alone can have effects on the industry. The community of Falmouth, Massachusetts has leveraged enough pressure to actually demand a vote to tear their turbines down. Beyond the medical legitimacy, we have to ask, what does it say about the future of alternative energy when so many people are willing to believe wind energy is dangerous? Second, as the ABC News article on Sue Hobart reveals, the families who have come forward with wind turbine syndrome are overwhelmingly affluent white families. Now, consider our current energy sources. We know coal mining is dangerous and coal causes deadly pollution. We know our dependence on oil has had effect on climate change and has directly led to violent conflicts that have killed millions. Are we willing to turn a blind eye to a clean energy source simply because there are a few people in a different demographic who might be mildly sick? But let's take an even closer look at the people with these symptoms. The University of Nottingham reported on March 21, 2013, that people with certain psychological profiles are more apt to believe in something like wind turbine syndrome. People who have what researchers are now calling a negative-oriented personality are not only more likely to believe nebulous causal factors, but are predisposed to having nonspecific medical symptoms. Those symptoms? Headaches and insomnia. Further research into this new profile could be the key to understanding those who are suffering. Sue Hobart is suing the local government. Falmouth, Massachusetts may tear down their turbines. Wind turbine syndrome might not be technically real, but its impacts clearly are. Today we explore the syndrome and true implications. Believe it or not, the future of America's energy production could hinge on a medical condition nobody actually has.
second speaker, Jeremy Plum.
On August 5th, 2013, a news conference was held over a VIP hamburger in Couch's Great House restaurant in Pulborough, Cornwall, earning its honorary status not for what it is, but for what it isn't. It's a burger grown in a petri dish, and the reviews were quite favorable. Chefs reported that the burger had an inviting smell and was easy to cook with, and it was further reported that the burger looked, and most importantly tasted, like the real thing. According to The Guardian, on August 6, 2013, Dr. Mark Post states that Dr. Mark Post revealed the first all-beef cultured burger. Cultured meat, according to a Future Foods website, last updated September 2013, is the manufacturing of meat products through tissue engineering. In short, this is not genetically modified meat, but this is real meat, only grown in a lab. Now, cultured meat isn't a new idea. In fact, it dates back to 2001. However, new strides in stem cell research could be putting an in vitro style hamburger in your local cafe's menu in the near future. So first, we are going to grind through a history of cultured meat, then neatly package how it is made, before finally opening up and grilling out some impacts about a type of meat that can dramatically change our source of protein. According to Dr. Post, one obstacle he wants to overcome is public perception, and have the public realize that this is real meat. So to help overcome this obstacle, we are going to look through the history of cultured meat. We will do this by first looking at the rises and beginnings of cultured meat, then seeing how Dr. Post is adding his own bit of seasoning to an already revolutionary food invention. Cultured meat, also called sheep meat, or schmeat, is man-made edible animal fibers that has no fillers such as soybeans, and has had a long history in the lab before its grand reveal in Cornwall. According to a portfolio article in 2009, the first attempts to create cultured meat happened in 2001, when NASA made a fish fillet and goldfish DNA. Cultured meat then gained further recognition when dermatologist Wheat Wisterhoff created a patent that used nutrients to help grow and divide cells, a process much like cell replication, and is a process still used by Dr. Post today. Furthermore, a Cabinet magazine article in 2005 states that in 2003, a steak made from frog DNA was created, and then eaten. After this, interest in cultured meat skyrocketed, with over 30 laboratories today interested in creating cultured meat for tomorrow. Now Dr. Post began his research in cultured meat in May 2013, according to a New York Times article on May 12, 2013. His interest in cultured meat actually stemmed from his previous work in the medical field studying human tissue. Before studying with beef cells, Dr. Post studied with chicken and even mice cells. Shortly afterwards, Dr. Post received funding from Google CEO and co-founder Sergey Birch, because the CEO saw the benefits in animal welfare. This funding helped lead Dr. Post to finish the cultured meat patty burger, and after a few private controlled tests, he was able to take it to Cornwall for the first public trial of cultured meat. And with this success underway, Dr. Post hopes to have many more successes in the near future, including, but not limited to, a cultured meat steak. Now, there was an objection to the taste of cultured meat, and that was, it was too dry. That's only because there was no fat cells added in the burger yet, a step Dr. Post hopes to complete in the near future. So after looking at a history of cultured meat, we can then look into how it is made. And we do this by first looking at where the cells originate from, then seeing how the cells are being implemented. Now, all of this starts off simply enough with cells. According to the aforementioned New York Times article, these cells are taken from the cow's neck, and two types of cells can be used: blank cells and muscle cells. Both are used in the creation of cultured meat, and the source of these cells can be used over and over again. Cells from one cow alone can be used to create tens of tons of meat. Now, once these cells are extracted, they need to grow. So to help do this, Dr. Post places the cells in fetal calf serum, nutrients to help make the cells grow. And while in the serum, oxygen is added while waste is removed. And this is to implement the action done by a circulatory system, according to an independent article on July 28, 2013. Now, once these cells are done growing, they need to turn into our favorite treat, the burger. However, depending on what types of cells you use does determine how much animal tissue, or meat, you actually get. Blank cells, after being turned into muscle cells, grow quickly but are relatively small, whereas muscle cells don't grow much at all, but are relatively larger than blank cells. Either way, no matter what types of cells we pick, very little meat is produced. So to help compensate for this, Dr. Post grows or exercises the cells into much larger sheets. But said sheets are still thinner than a grain of rice, according to the aforementioned Independent article. So to compensate for this, thousands upon thousands of these sheets are compressed and compiled in order to form much larger animal tissue. For example, Dr. Post needed over 20,000 of these sheets just to create the 5-ounce burger that was devoured last August. Once these steps are done, our burger is completed. Now, this does sound far more complicated than getting a burger off of a cow. It does have far less negative impacts than the cow on Old MacDonald's farm. Dr. Post was excited to reveal the cultured meat patty burger because it would change public perception from "this can never happen" to potential reality. So after looking at how cultured meat is made, we can then study its impacts. And there are as many impacts to cultured meat as there are sheets in Dr. Post's burger. But we're only going to look at two: environmental and consumer. According to a separate New York Times article on August 6, 2013, Dr. Mark Post states that the reason for creating his burger was so that meat eaters can continue to eat meat in an environmentally healthy way. Now, this is more than just the wish of a healthy meat eater. This is a true environmental impact. According to a study done by the U.S. Geological Survey in 2009, 37% of all water extracted in the United States are consumed by cattle. Furthermore, an Observer article on January 26, 2013 reports that almost 40% of all methane gas produced in the world are produced by cow bodily gases. Now, cultured meat uses dramatically less resources than the traditional alternative to obtain meat. According to a study done by Oxford University on June 17, 2011, cultured meat uses up to 99% less land and up to 96% less water. Now, whether we like it or not, our desire to eat meat is dramatically changing the world around us. And if we want to continue to eat the way we want to eat, then changes need to be made. And that change might actually be in the meat beneath Dr. Post's buns. Another impact is on the, there we go. Another impact is on the consumer level. According to a Huffington Post article on August 22, 2013, 80% of all antibiotics consumed are consumed by cattle. However, these antibiotics consumed on such a daily regimen create antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which, according to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention website, last updated September 30, 2013, include typhoid fever and tuberculosis, which can potentially harm us the next time we bite into our burger. Antibiotics are not used in the creation of cultured meat, however. In fact, all Dr. Post adds is beet juice for coloring, which furthers health impacts. What makes cultured meat so healthy is the only thing we bite into is real meat. Now, there is a downfall with schmeat, however, and that would be its price. So far, the cultured meat patty burger ranges anywhere from $3,000 all the way up to $338,000. Pocket change to middle-class Americans. Now, it is projected that the cultured meat patty burger would be consumer-ready in about 10 years. The price still needs to go down dramatically in order to be competitive at the consumer level. Health and environmental impacts mean absolutely nothing if the consumer cannot even afford it. Perhaps once this obstacle is overcome, cultured meat can positively impact our environment, our pocketbooks, and our tummies. Today we look further into in vitro meat by first looking at its history, then seeing how it is made, before finally studying its impacts. Cultured meat might actually be the answer to our meat-loving culture, allowing us to eat what we want to eat without all those negative repercussions. And Dr. Post might be giving us the answer to this culture by allowing us to have it our way.
Next up, Miranda Klugeshers.
Described as tall, handsome, and cooks like Jesus, MasterChef finalist Josh Marks shocked America in February 2013 when he revealed his ongoing battle with bipolar disorder. And 8 months later, Marks committed suicide in an alley behind his home. His mother remarks to CNN of October 14th, 2013, "We didn't even see it coming." Dr. Andrew Nisklo, professor at Indiana University School of Medicine, empathizes, posing the question: imagine a world where an individual on the brink of taking their own life could be identified with only a blood draw. As the current practice stands, clinicians must rely entirely on self-reported feelings and symptoms for diagnosis. But for any number of reasons, an individual's intent on suicide may not always be forthcoming. But in August 2013, with results Columbia University states are abnormally strong for the sample size, Nisklo's team has identified the response gene SAT1 to be what they believe is the biological tie to suicide. Considering that the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention states that someone will have committed suicide by the time I finish speaking today, it is imperative we understand Nisklo's findings by first examining the gene, second looking at the applications, and finally addressing implications to what the Los Angeles Times of August 20th, 2013 is calling the blood test for suicide. Now, Nisklo's research is certainly not the first of its kind. Many before him have attempted to quantify complex human behavior with biology. It is, however, one of the first to come as close to proving it. We can better understand his findings by first examining the gene and second looking at his research. Molecular Psychiatry of August 20th, 2013 attempts to explain to the lay public that SAT1 is an X-chromosome stress response gene. Yeah. The National Library of Medicine 2013 clarifies that much like the gene for hair color, celiac disease, or even cancer, SAT1 is a gene we're all born with. However, the mutation doesn't occur and the gene doesn't begin to express itself until an external stress event triggers it. Think of it as a biological light switch. When your body senses an intense response is necessary to protect you from some sort of outside stressor, genes within your body are automatically turned on or off to help aid in the process. And unfortunately, some people are just more susceptible to these triggers than others, basic knowledge of which is what Nisklo had to go off of. He explains that his research is based on a 5-year study of 75 individuals diagnosed with bipolar disorder. At 3-month intervals, participants were administered a questionnaire designed to reveal their state of mind, or otherwise known as suicidal ideation, and then provided researchers with a blood sample. Nisklo explains that high suicidal ideation is often a mark of mirroring levels of external stress, anxiety, depression, and the like, which are all known to be triggers of the SAT1 gene. Over the course of the study, Nisklo's team flagged individual subjects who had a high score on the 4-point Hamilton scale for depression. Then, using the blood tests, the gene expression results of the test group were then compared to those of individuals who had either attempted or completed suicide. And the results were alarming, revealing a rapidly growing relationship between suicidal ideation and high SAT1 activity within the body, to the tune of 79% higher in the blood of test subjects when compared to the rest of the population. And when compared to the levels in the blood of those who had completed their own death, 83% higher. Now, it's easy to look at Nisklo's research as a tangible death sentence. So the question then becomes, what on earth do we do with his findings? Applications come on the medicinal and psychiatric levels. Initially, the National Institute of Health in June 2013 explicates that prescription drug psychotherapy is largely still a dangerous game of guess and check. Because the biology behind mental illness is incredibly elusive, it's extremely difficult for professionals to pinpoint the correct drug to prescribe each patient, and at what strength. Daniel Cartlett, professor of clinical psychiatry at Tufts University, states that psychotropic drugs such as Xanax, Zoloft, or Prozac are often prescribed at levels that are too high, too low, or just plain incorrectly, taking a toll on hormone levels that not even someone with no history of mental illness can survive for extended periods of time. But through finding SAT1, the ability to determine the exact gene responsible for certain human behaviors significantly alters the field of psychotherapy, as professionals are now better able to match the individual to the medicine. And second, Dr. Dan Below, clinical director of the American Board of Suicidology, explains in a personal interview on January 30th, 2014, that one of the first steps taken by mental health providers upon presentation of a patient is to conduct a risk assessment examination. Now, he notes that the test is designed to reveal the potential risk an individual poses to both themselves and to others. And although the test is regarded as highly valid within the field, as many as 1 in every 5 individuals who cause themselves harm will not be indicated by the test. Dr. Below posits, when you ask someone to reveal their soul to you, they will comply. But we aren't infallible. Even as professionals, it is a daunting task to determine the deep-seated emotions and desires of someone you've known for less than an hour. ResearchGate of August 22nd, 2013 explains that SAT1 genes serve not only as state markers, which implicate an immediate threat, but also as trait markers, showing where there may be future risk. An initial blood test for SAT1 presence, coupled with the risk assessment examination, could provide clinicians with biological evidence that could quite literally become the voice for a very silent population. Dr. Below cites the SAT1 theory as the ethical dilemma of the century. He argues that although the gene itself is inherently controversial, the implications it offers are not to be ignored. His justification is twofold: reframing the perception of suicide, sociobiological disparities. Initially, Dr. Below argues that the adaptation of the SAT1 theory would help to further debunk the myth behind suicide as a choice made by an individual, and help to reframe the perception of suicide as a response to external factors. He contends, as a clinician, this is a tactic he has used hundreds of times over to create healing for loved ones, stating, "You can literally see the guilt lifted from their shoulders and a light return to their eyes as the question of, could I have done more, dissipates." As the APA 2014 explicates that 1 in every 5 Americans has been directly influenced by suicide, the SAT1 theory could do just as much to help those considering suicide as it would to help those trying to move past it. And second, suicide is still one of the largest yet unknown sociobiological inequalities. The Guardian of January 23rd, 2014 cites that men are 4 times more likely to complete a suicide attempt than women, a statistic that, prior to Nislow's research, had been chalked up to sociological discrepancies. Dr. Below argues it would be the last thing his profession and we as a society need is a biological justification to place the mental health of women on the back burner. And additionally, Nislow stresses in his final report the inherent complexity of suicide, positing that existential factors related to lack of hope, satisfaction, or even cultural influences can make suicide seem like the only option. It can lead to drastic measures being taken even without the initial physical presence of the SAT1 gene. Dr. Below cautions it would be a grave yet potentially inevitable mistake of health professionals to write off entirely those who do not initially exhibit SAT1, arguing the blood test alone can't provide all the answers. All factors need to be assessed to determine someone's suicide risk, because we cannot replace real, raw human emotions with biology. When Mark's death fell in tandem with my school's Suicide Prevention Week, we couldn't help but question why we, as college students, who are often known to be one of the most vulnerable age groups to befall this sort of tragedy, dedicate only a week out of the year for awareness and prevention. Through finding SAT1, as well as examining the applications and implications it offers, it's clear we may be well on our way to a world more equipped to help those in Josh Mark's place. Still, the question remains, how long until it's no longer necessary?
speaker is going to be Mr. Daniel Wheaton.
The Russian government wants you to be more polite. Namely, by preventing you from using profanity on the internet. According to a July 27, 2013 article on Salon.com, a new proposal from the Duma would eliminate profanity from web comments, and websites that fail to comply will be taken down. The commenter and the website host would then be blacklisted. The Russian government claims it's for the children, but as free speech advocates point out, the majority of angry, profane comments are directed at Moscow itself. This is as much a political crackdown as it is a linguistic one. Still, many governments, including our own, go to extreme lengths to limit the use of these words in the public sphere. Controversies over the appropriateness of profanity are nothing new, but our understanding of how they operate and the effects that they cause is. According to an August 3rd, 2013 article in Time, profanity has the power to heal pain, cause it in others, and increase persuasion. And, according to a September 11th, 2013 article on Discovery.com, changes in profanity mirror social changes and give us insight into a culture's values and power structures. Profanity is a necessary part of human communication, which must be understood. In order to better understand the profane, let's take a look at its history through the English language. Second, see some of the science behind it, and finally, discuss some implications for the future. Because, as linguist Melissa Moore writes in the May 23rd, 2013 Guardian, profanity is a part of human language that may be as human as language itself. Profanity, curse words, just plain swearing, whatever you want to call it, is a product of political and social forces. We can explore this by looking how profanity was used in the Dark Ages, how it changed in the Middle Ages, and discussing modern swears. If you were to say the S word to someone in the Dark Ages, you likely wouldn't have offended anyone. According to Melissa Moore's 2013 book, Holy S-H*T, A Brief History of Swearing, this is because going to the bathroom wasn't a private affair. Privies were simply benches with holes, and there weren't any stalls. People likely sat down and had conversations while using them. Profanity derives its power from taboos, which is why the advent of restroom privacy would turn a normal discussion into a profane one. In the Middle Ages, the S and F word, Fricken, wouldn't have turned heads. Instead, O's were the most offensive things you could say. The F-bomb of 13th century England was, by God's bones. According to the April 13th, 2013 Wall Street Journal, these words were thought to literally injure Jesus in heaven. This mirrored the socio-political conditions at the time. This was when the Catholic Church was at their height of power and dominated everyone's lives, and their effect on the vernacular reflected that. Our modern tongue, which uses phrases like "God damn it" casually, showed the declining role of religion and church in modern-day life. In the 20th century, controversies over profanity shifted to the airwaves. George Carlin's famous comedy routine, 7 dirty words you can't say on TV, which are 7 dirty words Duncan won't let me say in this speech, led to the 1973 Supreme Court case, the United States Federal Communications Commission versus the Pacifica Foundation. The court ruled in a 5-4 decision that the FCC has the right to limit the use of certain words on public broadcasts. But as social standards have changed, so have the rules. According to a May 15, 2013 press release from the FCC, these laws are currently under review. The increasing amount of profanity on our airwaves is related to an increasing amount of profanity in our daily conversation. According to an August 8, 2013 post on the Association for Psychological Sciences blog, it's about 140 bad words a day. Or, if you do DI, that number jumps to 240. Statistically, these words are used almost as much as pronouns and serve a vital function in our everyday vocabulary. While modern people have the Urban Dictionary to look up the newest profanities, in the 17th century, you could turn to the Classical Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue, which must have been quite popular with literate adolescents. Surprisingly, science suggests there's a reason why we need to curse. In his book, Why We Curse, Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts psychology professor Timothy J. writes, profanity is unique because it has neurological social, and psychological elements. To explore these elements, let's take a look at how profanity operates in our brain, how it can relieve pain, and how it can inflict stress. First, for the neurological element, Jay explains, the left technical parts of the brain deal with the hard parts of language, so grammar, while the right creative part deals with emotions. The right also stores speech we can say without thinking, so greetings, the Pledge of Allegiance, and curse words. On MRI scans, parts of the brain's right hemisphere literally light up as neurons fire, translating emotions into curse words. This explains why people who suffer right hemisphere brain damage or may have cognitive disorders may lose their ability to control their swearing. Second, consider what you say when you stub your toe. Chances are, if it really hurt, it's a curse word. This actually helps relieve your pain. Richard Stevens of Keele University discovered this by having researchers place their hands in a bowl of ice-cold water and found that those with the dirtiest mouths were able to tolerate it much longer. Stevens posits this is because the emotion behind swearing triggers the flight or flight response in humans, which releases adrenaline and endorphins, resulting in the relief of pain. So, next time you have a headache, consider dropping some F-bombs before taking an Advil. Finally, while profanity may heal pain in those who say it, it can cause it in those who hear it. Researchers found when someone says F you, it causes a spike in stress hormones. To make sure it was the words, not the tones, individuals were yelled at using euphemisms. This didn't show the same effect. However, those who were sworn at showed a similar psychological response to people who experienced actual physical violence. Meaning, we need to be aware of the power of profanity and who we direct it at. The film with the most amount of cursing is this winter's blockbuster, The Wolf of Wall Street. It has more than 500 instances of the F word, which means it's used almost 3 times per minute. After discussing the history of profanity and seeing how it works in our brains, we can finally discuss implications for the changing nature of profanity in our modern society. First, profanity can shape our minds in unexpected ways. Researchers found that light swearing, such as damn it, can make an individual feel more persuaded because it shows the orator cares about what's being said. As Forbes reported in July of 2011, Northern Illinois researchers discovered this in 2006. They had researchers watch a series of speeches and found the speech with the damn it made them feel more persuaded. This makes no surprise then that some of the most iconic moments in cinema involve these words. Whether you are as mad as hell and not going to take this anymore, or, frankly, my dear, I just don't give a damn. The persuasive power of these words needs to be continually explored to understand how and why they affect centers of the persuasion in the human brain. Finally, profanity is on the verge of an evolution. As Slate reports on July 1st, 2013, the American Society's definitions of taboo are shifting. The F and S words don't have as much power as they used to, and people have become more open about the facts of life. Instead, words that directly attack someone, often on prejudice lines, are the few that actually offend. But the frequency of using racist or sexist terms has decreased over the past decade, Melissa Moore writes in the aforementioned book. She goes on to say, "This is a positive development, a sign we were able to put ourselves in each other's shoes more so than the past, at least linguistically and notionally, respect people of all sorts. Still, society needs taboo words. We must have a way to communicate when we are truly angry or in pain, and profanity provides an obvious vehicle to do so." After discussing the history of profanity, seeing how it works in our brains, and discussed implications, it's clear these words aren't going anywhere. Profanity has the power to heal pain, cause it in others, and, by God's bones, it allows us to laugh and bond. Even though the Duma will likely succeed in limiting speech, there is absolutely nothing they can do to limit the power of these words. Thank you. May you please be excused?
Yes.
Thanks. Good luck to everyone else.
Next speaker, Mr. Trey Graham.
Five-year-old Jacob Philadelphia had one thing he wanted to ask the president. I want to know if my hair is just like yours. President Obama replied, why don't you touch it and see for yourself? Though taken 3 years ago, this photo still hangs in the West Wing, a subtle reminder of the inherent politics associated with simply having black hair. In their 2014 book, Hair Story, Untangling the Roots of Black Hair in America, authors Ayanna Bird and Lori L. Tharps argue that black hair was political long before we had a president who actually had some. In the year 1444, Europeans began trading with Africans, but only those with elaborate hairstyles like braids or twists. In 1619, the first slaves were brought to Jamestown and forbidden from using African grooming techniques. By 1700s, whites called black hair wool to dehumanize them and associate them with animals. And in the 1800s, without herbal treatments used in Africa, slaves relied on bacon grease, butter, and kerosene to manage their hair. Although the significance of black hair as cultural and personal expression has been explored for decades, the Washington Post of November 6, 2013 explains, black hair is as political as it is cultural. Hair is a measuring stick of respectability, success, and political significance. The Philadelphia Tribune reported on March 3, 2013, the first ever symposium on the politics of black hair was held this past spring. It found that our analysis of black hair must move beyond cultural and personal empowerment and focus on political and social ramifications. Otherwise, we risk repeating the same mistakes that have oppressed blacks for centuries. So today, we'll elevate the discussion of black hair in America by examining its uniqueness on scientific and economic levels. After second, its political significance. And finally, implications. As Dr. Melissa Harris Perry said in a roundtable discussion on MSNBC on June 20th, 2012, no matter how you style black hair, it always makes a statement. Bill de Blasio is the new mayor of New York City. This is his son, Dante. While campaigning, de Blasio's opponents used the phrase, "Fro no," to suggest his hairstyle was somehow politically incorrect. De Blasio asked his supporters to hashtag, "Go with the fro." So, let's examine how a hairstyle became a campaign focus. But first, examining the chemistry of black hair. And second, its economic impact. This just in, black hair and white hair are different. And as the African American Registry website last updated in the summer of 2013 explains, there is no chemical difference. What's different is the wave, curl, or kink, but most notably, the bonding pattern, which is how tight one hair follicle is. The tighter the bond, the curlier the hair. And that varies even on one person's head. According to a 2013 post on blackhairscience.com, black hair can be fine or coarse, tightly curled or loose, and colored red to black. And although all varieties are natural, straighter hair is generally called good, and coarse, tightly curled hair is considered bad. Even during slavery, slaves with softer, straighter hair sold at higher prices at auctions. Dr. Cynthia L. Robinson argues in the 2011 Howard Journal of Communication, these variances create tension, not only between blacks and whites, but blacks with bad hair are pit against those with good hair. Second, black hair is big business, and it always has been. In 1910, the world's first ever female self-made millionaire was Madam C.J. Walker, who got rich by figuring out how to tame black hair. But that was just the beginning. As the Dallas Star reported on July 10, 2013, black hair care is a $9 billion industry, and black women account for an astonishing 65% of all hair care revenue. And there is also a black market for black hair. At the aforementioned roundtable discussion, cultural critic Gene Morgan noted a rise in the people who steal extensions and resell them. And if that's not enough, BBC News on February 26, 2012 introduces us to Sid Cradell. In reports, Zimbabwean Jack Maseko was tackled by a group of South Africans who cut the dreads right off his scalp. Thieves use scissors or broken glass to cut the dreads and sell them for $20 to $200. These dreaded thieves, as BBC calls them, are the most literal example of the cost of black hair. A group of black women stood in Union Square in New York City, holding up signs that read, "Go ahead, you can touch my hair." As NPR reported on July 10, 2013, this led to controversy and counter-protests, proving that black hair is no less political now than it was back in Jamestown. So let's first explore institutionalized policies about black hair, and second, its political significance. First, many black hairstyles, including ones that simply come from letting hair grow naturally, are illegal in certain places. The Grio of August 24, 2012, introduces us to Sid Cradell, Dean of Hampton University's School of Business. 10 years ago, he banned dreadlocks, calling them unprofessional and a barrier to good jobs, despite the fact that Mr. Cradell himself is a black man. All across the country, policies like these are in effect in schools and businesses, reinforcing that uniquely black hairstyles are somehow controversial. Consider 7-year-old Tiana Parker. She was sent home from grade school because this hairstyle was considered a distraction. According to the Oklahoma City News of September 26, 2012, a black parent turned Tiana into authorities, citing the school's dress code, which prohibits dreadlocks, afros, and other faddish styles. Not only are no inherently white hairstyles banned, black hairstyles are considered fads. Tiana is a straight A student who was given the choice of changing her hair or changing her school. Second, black hairstyles are almost always perceived as negative. The aforementioned Dr. Melissa Harris Perry said, "You can't help but make a statement. We're natural and you are a part of the transitioning movement, which foregoes all chemical products. Wear a weave and some will claim you are ashamed of your body. Choose an afro and you may as well raise a fist and yell, 'Black Power!' If it seems extreme, consider the Washington Post of November 6, 2013, which explains, even the Obama girls, Sasha and Malia, do away with barrettes and braids for high-profile events. When politically representing America, their hair is almost always straight." According to the Atlanta Journal, September 23, 2012, probation officer Richard Williams was fired for refusing to cut his dreadlocks. So long as certain hairstyles are treated dramatically different, it's only fair to ask what implications come from being born with black hair. Let's consider two. First, even well-intended attempts to normalize black hair are reinforcing discrimination. Photographer Andy Abil rounded up a group of middle-aged white women, took them to black hair salons, gave them black hairstyles, and took their business portraits. Abil's intent was to bring awareness. The result was treated with near ridicule, because what's out of place in these executive portraits isn't the white women, it's the black hair. Consider the Union Square protesters. While their intention was to demonstrate pride in their hair, having white people come up and touch it didn't make them feel a connection. It made them feel like they were a petting zoo. Hopefully, academic discussions like this year's symposium will explore ways to prevent those with good intentions from doing more harm. Second, while white attitudes shaped the initial American belief about black hair in America, much of the current damage comes from within the black community itself. The aforementioned Dr. Robinson argues that in homes and communities all across the U.S., there exists a hidden caste system with a long and painful history. Slavery, Jim Crow, and decades of oppression created a psychological fixation in blacks, which Dr. Robinson argues causes them to devalue and avoid characteristics that link them to African ancestry. The white bias, started more than 500 years ago, has become internalized in the black community. Without awareness and discussion, white privilege will remain a black reality. So today, we examine the unique role of black hair in America. The issues that surround this hair are as tangled as you would expect. And just as a 5-year-old boy once reminded us, even in the White House, black hair still matters.
Our last speaker, Alyssa Boats.
When video game designer Jane McGonigal suffered a severe concussion at age 32, the injury escalated to frequent migraines and a constant mental fog, forcing her to stop living an active life. The injury soon led to depression and anxiety, which continued to suicidal thoughts. McGonigal strongly believes in the power of gaming, so she decided to battle her illness by turning her struggles into a game. Jane the Concussion Slayer. She recruited her husband and sister as allies in the game. She identified her bad guys, or triggers for her symptoms, like bright lights and crowded spaces. Next, she activated power-ups, or small positive tasks she could perform just to feel better, like cuddling with her dog or walking around the block. In her July 2012 TED Talk, McGonigal explains that she began to feel better after playing her game.